Non-partisan race, so none of this Democrat-Republican stuff. So, I don't have to yell at Phil and not Phil Goodman. Phil from the Democrats are talking back there. Phil Goodman never talked. All right, we're going to get going. Naj's going to lead us off with school district number 2. No? Yes, school district number 2. It's been a long night.
Okay, I'd like to hear from each of you on this. We'll start with Andy Griffith. My kids and their friends do an awful lot of complaining about school lunches. I hear talk of neon-colored veggies and scary-looking meat. And then there are the endless lines for pizza, which they tell me is the #1 daily food choice for 90% of the students. This is at the high school. Are we offering good, nutritious food to our kids?
Well, the school lunches are regulated by the federal government, but there are some things we can do and still be in compliance. You know, it's very, very specific what you have to have and what you cannot have. But the state, or actually the feds did change where now each student has to take a vegetable and a fruit on their plate. That's new this year. I'm hoping that they will not turn it in. I'm hoping they'll eat one or the other, or that it'll be of a quality that they'll want to eat it. It's a real struggle to get students when you have the competition of corn syrup and virtually everything tastes good. So it's a struggle. It's definitely would take a partnership with the home to educate the child. You know, a lot of them, the 2 meals at school, breakfast and lunch, may be the only meal they get that day. So it is important. But I'm certainly open to ideas. We've been a little distracted lately, but I'm certainly open to new ideas. It is a very restricted program, but there are places where we can improve it.
Just a little follow-up. The quality, have you looked at the food yourself? Or
Yes, yeah.
What do you think about the quality yourself?
You know, the quality, I may depend. HOB, the quality was better when they actually cooked the food on site. Now they're having to eat in the gymnasium, so they actually have to have a satellite kitchen at Glen Archer and transport it, and the quality has suffered. There's no doubt about that. But that is temporary. Unfortunately, we can't afford to have a kitchen in every school, but I would certainly promote using our local assets, you know, fish, black beans and rice. You know, when I went to school, we had all of that, but it certainly has changed over the years.
Well, as was just said, it is a state mandate what children can't eat in school, but I'm not opposed to the idea of having just graduated my 3rd child, and doesn't matter what I put in front of them, quality or not, they're difficult to convince kids to eat. But I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of forming a steering committee and meeting with parents of the different schools and see if they had suggestions in order to improve the food so that the children would feel that it was something they would enjoy eating. Because it is true that a lot of kids that I've run into over the years, those are the only 2 meals of the day that they get, which is breakfast and lunch. So we have to do what we can to make it as appetizing as we can and as healthy as we can, because school has become the primary meal for many children.
Yvette, you have made a point of gender on the board, saying that you think the board needs a woman's perspective, that female representation should be on the board. What is that perspective that's missing?
I found in my experience that men tend to think very black and white. Women tend to think a little bit more emotionally, and I think that we have a certain compassion, and I think when making decisions, I think that I would always have children at the forefront of my mind, whereas it's possible that men think more black and white. So I believe that having been the mother of 3 children, I do have a different perspective. I mean, women in general just have a different perspective. That isn't the only reason, but yes, I think a female perspective adds an entirely different twist to things, and I think that most will agree that we do have something very valuable to give to that board.
Andy, do you think the board needs a female perspective?
I think the board needs someone who's passionate about public education, Richard. And I remain very passionate as a father of 2 teenagers. I'm the only candidate running with skin in the game. My daughter still goes to school in the public schools. My cousin's grandchildren just went into Key Largo school. So you might say I've got skin in the game from one end to the other. So I remain very passionate about public education. And I don't think you need to have gender to be passionate.
Okay, Andy, at a previous forum, you asked for Ken Gentili and Michael Kincaid to be removed. Do you still feel that this action should be taken?
Actually, that's not what I said. What I said was we need to look at consolidating some positions, and what we needed was a school finance officer who understands school finance. And since we had an asset currently earning a large salary, then we turn that asset into finance. And while he's doing very well, it's not his expertise in school finance. So I thought that we ought to look at perhaps changing that position, eliminating the position. Now it's called the Chief of Staff. I continue to question what that really means. I read the job description, and then I see it's called the Chief of Staff. So I continue to question that. I think what we need is a school finance officer. They don't cost as much as we're paying the Chief of Staff. On the other hand, we have a CFO. We never had one of those before. We let Joe Burke talk us into getting one of those. He said he needed one of those. He was the Charlie Chris appointee. He came in. We tried to be cooperative. He said, this is what I need to move the district forward, and we granted him that CFO position. We never had one before. So yeah, I just would like to look at those two positions, or maybe other positions we need that are more appropriate and less costly.
This is a question for both of you, and it's a you be the teacher question, where on a scale from 1 to 100, what grade would you give the following three things? 1, the process used by the school board to select the new superintendent. 2, the job our school principals are doing countywide. And 3, the overall job that the school board has done in managing the school district since the departure of Randy Acevedo. And Andy, we'll start with you. Again, those 3 are the process used, the job the principals are doing, and the overall job the school board has done since Randy left.
Well, on the first one, Ed, I made a phone call because I have a relationship with the executive director of the Florida School Board Association in Tallahassee, and I urged him to come down and conduct a workshop because we were not taking any action, and the window of opportunity was quickly closing. So Wayne came down to the workshop. I invited 40 people that I know were also passionate about public education and this issue, and we were off and running. And with 2 months and 2 weeks later, we had Mr. Porter hired. I'd give us a 98. Now, on the job our principals are doing up and down these keys, I don't know if you read the paper this morning, but one of our most diverse schools has a 72% free reduced lunch participation rate. And then you can go up to Plantation Key School, and it's a little bit different challenge. But all of our principals are doing a great job under very, very difficult circumstances when you consider the children that are going into school now may not show up speaking the language, may not be up to grade level in their own native language, much less English. So they have to also evaluate the teachers that are under them and make sure that they're effective. That's extraordinarily difficult because they haven't all been successful in getting all teachers to be the best they can be. I would probably give that a 90. And then with the overall performance of the school board since the, oh my gosh, are we still talking about that? How far back do we have to go for this grade?
Well, since the departure of Randy Acevedo.
Since the departure of Randy Acevedo. That's going on 4 years now. It's 4 superintendents we've had since then. Well, I'll tell you, I held the gavel for the most difficult part of that time because the finance director turned the evidence over to me that I had to turn it to the state attorney. So if you want to go about guts and conviction and trying to do the right thing, when one side they want to do too much and the other side wants to do too little, and you're in the middle trying to decide what's right, are you going to grade me or are you going to grade the board as a whole?
I'm asking you.
I grade myself higher, but the board as a whole I would give them probably an 80.
That same question.
Well, as far as the school board search, school superintendent search, I think that we should have perhaps have a smaller group, it seems like a large number of people to find the new superintendent. yes, I think that we should have some type of workshop and train them, but I think a smaller, more concise group probably would have been just as effective. And I would have liked to have seen the school board perhaps take a more active role in looking for the candidates. I feel like we do have a very capable HR department, and I would have liked to see them conduct that search as well, and not necessarily spend money on hiring someone to come in and tell us how to do what it is that our HR department is paid to do. And I think with direction from the school board, I think perhaps we could have found our new superintendent. So I would grade that a B. I think we could have improved on that a little bit with a little bit more thought. The second one, grading the principals. I don't really feel comfortable doing that because all I am is an observer. I read, you know, what most of us read in the newspapers and hearsay, so I don't feel like I'm in a position to do that. But as I visited many of our schools throughout the county, I am continuously impressed with what these teachers do and these principals do, administrators do, with the little they have to do it with. So if I had to grade them, and generally speaking, not going school by school, you'd have to give them an A+. They have faced the most incredible challenge I can imagine, and they have persevered. So I say A to principals and administration. And third. Again, that's a difficult one to answer. I mean, as a whole, individually, I'm going to have to say a failing grade. I mean, originally we had put all of the blame on Mr. Acevedo's administration, but since his departure, we have continued to find ourselves in the headlines of the newspaper on a regular basis. So I just don't feel comfortable giving a passing grade on that one.
Okay. There's a lot of talk of budgets and lack of funding and waste in the school district. But is it all about money? Are there any initiatives that call out to you that could be carried out to better our schools that would not require increased funding? Maybe some creativity?
Creativity, I really think that the only resource that's left untapped, more or less, are parents. I don't see how else we can continue to do and provide the services that we do if we do not call upon our community and our families to help us out. Today, as you saw in the newspaper, we lost funding from a grant that provided tutoring and help to many of our students that so desperately need it. We cannot call on the nonprofits. They're struggling just like everybody else is. So I think we're going to have to become creative. We're going to have to think out of the box. We're going to have to call on people in our community who have the willingness to come in and support our school district. We're all family. I mean, we're a very small, tight-knit district, and I think that we're going to have no option but to call on our resources right here within our own small communities to supplement these programs as best we can.
No, it's certainly not all about money. It's about priorities. There's never enough money, and there never will be enough money. So you have to have priorities. But I can remember way back when schools in Monroe County operated like charter schools. Instead of giving an allocation or a human resource allocation, they gave them dollars. And that's really effective, because you look at a charter school and you go in on a nice, brisk fall day, the windows are open, the air conditioner's not running, because everybody's got skin in the game. So it's just a different culture that we got away from, and I think it's one we may want to get back to. I think when you get that decision making at the local school, it vastly improves the creativity. If they have to pay their own light bill, their own garbage bill, they'll do things, they'll get creative. But when you try to do it at a bureaucratic level, bureaucracies tend to stifle creativity. So the closer you get to the student, I think the better creativity will bubble up.
It's been talked about for a long time, and Andy, you talked a little bit about this, about our school system with a top-heavy administration. A lot of these jobs may be redundant in some way. Where would you, and I'm going to talk to that first, where is the budget line where you would cut instruction and administration? It's a balance, and what would you look at first? And could I count on you to really look at the administration of our school system and trim the fat?
You can always count on me to trim the fat. I am I'm a small business owner. I have to work effectively and efficiently. So I would continue to do that. But we also have to stop and think at what cost. We talk about cutting administration, we talk about cutting people at the top, but you also have to continue to be effective, because we have to be able to service our schools and our children. So you cannot go so drastic that we cannot function as a school district.
So you don't think the administration is top-heavy at this time?
I'm not saying that. I said that is something I would absolutely review.
Do you think it is?
Do I think it is? I think that, I go down to the school board office right now and it's bare bones. It's bare bones. You see people doing multiple tasks. I see someone in the room here who's also in the position to do multiple tasks. I think that I need to take a very hard, long look at their job descriptions, what they're doing, and how effective they are to our school system and to our children before I can make a really good decision on that.
Andy?
Again, it's about priorities. 10 years ago, 53% of our income went directly to instruction. 5 years ago, it was 60%. Today, we're at 66% when we close the books, the annual financial report on June 30th. We may not have all the money we'd like to have, but the money we do have, I think our priorities are appropriate. Our administration is lean, and it troubles me. But maybe if we have the same amount of dollar allocation, and look at, do we have the right people in the right jobs? And without an elected superintendent now, we evaluate the superintendent on if he's bringing that in line with appropriate funding. Perhaps we have enough funding going to administration, but do we have the right people in the right positions? When you have an elected CEO, maybe not. We have for the first time a hired CEO. I think now we'll know if we're going to make progress or not, because we can hold the superintendent accountable for whether or not we're appropriately staffed. Before all the cuts, and everybody's speaking about these cuts, before we made the cuts this year, the certified teacher to student ratio in the entire county was 12.5 to 1. That's a fact. Today it's 13.7 to 1. It's far below the state average. And I know there's bigger classes out there, but that's the certified teacher to student ratio. That's a good number to follow when you're trying to set these priorities and allocate dollars, scarce dollars.
Okay, this is for both of you. Andy, you can start. How much direct interaction do you think that a board member should have with the schools? So, for example, do you think that they should be visiting the schools on a regular basis?
I would. I think it's very valuable, but you can also understand knowing a little bit about what goes on in the classroom is probably helpful to know to make decisions in the boardroom. You know, we set policy, but we do have to let our administrators, who are the experts, and do this every day, we need to let them do their jobs, because if we have to do their jobs for them, then we have the wrong administrators. So I don't believe we should micromanage experts, but if experts don't perform well, then we need to get different experts. But I think it's definitely, I try my best to be visible throughout the community as much as I can, because you're accessible, you're easy, you're approachable, and if you have a question, you don't have to go to a forum. I mean, I'm there. I was just in Key Largo School before this weekend. I spent a good part of the day there, visiting classrooms, every grade level. I visited the Ocean Studies Charter School the same day. So yeah, I do think it's important. I do it.
Yes, a school board member's job is to set policy. But I think the only way to really be in tune with what's going on is to have a good feeling for what's happening in the schools. And I don't necessarily think that goes in, touring the hallways and peeking in a window. I have the unique perspective of being very actively involved with many of the schools here in Monroe County. And I do think that is something that, there has to be a limit. You obviously cannot be in the schools all day long. You have to trust the people that work for you, that are doing their job, and the superintendent is overseeing each of those schools. But I absolutely think that you need to have some kind of connection with the schools and teachers and students in order to have a very, very good feel for what is needed in the schools.
I saw this at a candidates forum a couple of weeks ago with the sheriff's race, and it worked out well. So I'm going to start with you, Yvette. What's one question you would pose to your opponent? And then Andy, same thing.
My question is, I suppose, something that I wonder often, what's going to be different over the next 4 years? Where are the changes going to be that you haven't used over the last 20? Going from this critical period that I can never remember, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what you're going to offer. So my question is, what will you do differently and how will you be more effective in the next 4 years than you have been in the last 4?
I knew change was going to come up, so I made some notes. The hired superintendent that I have longed for many, many years and stuck to it has finally arrived. So we've gone from a new board, and you're going to have a new board member in District 3, no matter what, no matter who you elect. We have 4 superintendents in 4 years. We've gone from elected to governor appointed, and now finally hired. We're going to go from tenure and seniority to annual evaluations. We've gone from 53% to 66% of dollars in the classroom. We've gone from deficit spending to a balanced budget. We're going from crisis management to planning. I think we need stability for a change. And I think that my experience at this point in history would be extremely valuable, and I've never been more passionate about public education than I am now.
And Andy, what question would you ask your opponent?
What specifically would you do your first month on the job if you were being elected to the school board? What's the first thing that you would do if you were elected to the school board in the first month?
The very first thing that I would do is have a meeting with the superintendent, and my very top priority would be to get our finance department in order. To me, it is completely unacceptable that we have had so many findings over the last several years, some repeated, and just let it go on. People need to regain public trust, and where we lost their trust was with money. So that would be at the top of my list, to sit down with him and put checkpoints in place so that we can bring back a perfect audit, because that is what it should be. And I can rest at night knowing that we have spent our money effectively. People know that it's been spent exactly where it needs to be spent, and that we're serving our kids, because if all that money is there and everything is in order, we have nothing else to worry. Everything else will fall into place.
Okay, that's it, 7:30.